So, what's going on, Kingdom Success podcast listeners and viewers? Thank you so much for tuning into the channel or the podcast, whichever one you're listening to or watching. This is episode 431, and I'm excited to do this episode. All right, I'm doing a little bit different setup. Normally, I'm sitting over there, but today I'm actually sitting on my desk. I have my microphone hooked up right here. I've got some notes on my computer. I also got some notes right here as well. And I've even got my Bible, all right, sitting in front of me. The reason for the message today, I actually attended a networking event. Yep, yours truly, Tyler McCart. Go to networking events, which are actually, I would recommend you going to a networking event if you've never been to a networking event. This one actually happened to be actually at the private Christian school that my kids attend. And about every other month, they actually do a networking event just to gather up any kind of business leaders. So today they actually had Coach Kenny Dallas, my son, Tyler Jr.'s head football coach, share this morning. And he brought up actually in his, before we actually finished up our networking event, he just did a quick little Bible study and reference to the parable of the talents. And I'm not going to I might get into that a little bit, but it just sparked to me this whole entire thing that I've actually been really kind of I won't say wrestling with, but meditating on since really November. And that is stewardship versus ownership. Stewardship versus ownership. And I want you to follow me a little bit because this has been rolling around in me for a little bit of time, but I want to actually just kind of give you the context of this and kind of why it really kind of ministered to me, and it might minister to you, my listener or viewer. So I attended, as you guys might know, I attended the event with David Green and his family at Hobby Lobby back in November. And at that event, David Green actually referenced a book and actually something that the Lord talked with him about that happened right around the time that whenever he was getting ready to turn 60 years old. And today he's 84. So this has been 20 years ago. So this is right around maybe 2000-ish, 2000-ish, 99, 2000, somewhere in there that he was telling the story. And as the story kind of goes, he was wrestling with the whole entire idea of how am I supposed to transition, our business. And Hobby Lobby was actually getting ready to crest over, or was right at $1 billion in sales. Fairly significant. He was the owner. Him and his wife had about 85% of the ownership. They had 3 children. And of those 3 children, they all had 5% interest or equity in the business. And, he was starting this whole entire thing of like the way that things are supposed to be going. I'm supposed to retire. I'm supposed to kind of, go down to Florida, sail off into the sunset, sip on, I don't know, Mai Tais. I don't think he drinks or anything like that, but whatever. And go and enjoy the fruits of my labor, which in all retrospect is kind of, and this is maybe a side thing, that the Bible doesn't even talk about retirement. The Bible never even mentions the word. And that might be another episode for another day. But David Green just couldn't get his hands or arms around this whole entire idea of like succession and passing the actual business off to his kids, or who would be the person to take over if he retired and went on down to Florida. Was that what he was supposed to do? Was he supposed to retire? And he was sitting there wrestling with this during that time of the early 2000s with him. And, it would keep him up at night. Well, after a couple months of this, one night he was actually talking with the Lord, and it was late at night. And Holy Spirit basically said, if the Jones family owned Hobby Lobby, how would you act? What would you do? And David was like, well, quite honestly, I really wouldn't be that concerned about the succession plan. I wouldn't be concerned about who was going to run the business because that wasn't my job at all to try to figure that out. I just needed to be the good CEO right now that I needed to be. And yeah, I mean, that's be kind of where I would need to be at. Well, the Lord said, well, David, hello, I'm the owner of Hobby Lobby, not you. Okay. So if I'm the owner of the Hobby Lobby, then you are just the CEO or steward or head steward, if you want to look at it from that perspective, head steward of actually the business. And that set off in David Green, a whole chain of events and a whole different mindset that he began to actually look through the lens of business ownership versus stewardship. And when he shared that story with me, it really impacted me, guys, to the point where I'm like, golly, man, if you're the owner, and this is very key what I'm getting ready to say, if you're the owner of the business, then all the responsibility falls on you. Okay. If you're the one trying to run your family or head your family up, or, if you're trying to lead an organization, then that responsibility, that duty that you have can seem very, very heavy. But if you actually look at it through the gospel or through the teachings of Jesus and kind of how the Bible talks about that God is actually the owner of it all. That I think it says somewhere in Colossians that He is everything was made by Him, but it was also made for Him. I think it's somewhere in Colossians. I'm not exactly sure, but God has a purpose, and God actually wants everything to run through Him. It was never meant to be separated from Him. It was meant to all be run through Him. And so this whole idea of stewardship really needs to kind of come to the forefront of our mind, because Jesus, towards the latter part, before He left this earth, He talked in parables and used a stewardship or steward or servant illustrations or parables several times. I mean, I just looked this up right here, and he uses, where that the owner or the king or the master or whatever, however the parable goes, is actually absent or leaves these stewards or servants in charge. And there's right at about in the book of Matthew, there's four. In the book of Mark, there's two of these ones. And then the book of Luke, there's three. And we most know the ones of the parable of the talents. And then there is also the parable of the minas. Actually, not a lot of people actually talk about the parable of the minas. I'll get back to that one maybe a different day. But the majority of people do know about the parable of talents. I come at that from a stewardship and ownership perspective. But if you look at actually the one about the parable of the talents, that master or that business owner or that king, whichever way it is looked at, gave to those individuals, those stewards, the resources. He was the one that actually employed, and he was actually the one that gave those resources to that. They were just entrusted to actually go and take those resources and actually multiply those resources. It wasn't the responsibility of them to own any of that. It wasn't theirs to begin with, but they were still responsible for trying to get the increase. I mean, even the wicked servant that actually, the lazy and wicked servant that was mentioned in the word, by the way, I mean, just the whole entire thing of, not that he was, that servant was actually, he called was lazy, but he was also called wicked because he was not utilizing any part, or he didn't go and utilize the talent that was given to him to actually increase that on behalf of the owner. I think that's very fascinating that you actually can be wicked if you're not utilizing what God has given you. But the master comes back and says, hey man, you could at least put it into the bank and drawn some interest off of it. That's the least you could have done. You know, obviously there was risk involved, but with the other ones to go out and try to increase that, but they did get an increase in that. But it's just interesting how that I want us as Kingdom Success listeners and viewers to start to get this mindset of a steward where you don't have the burden of ownership, that the burden falls back on the owner because he is the one that's actually supposed to supply you. He's the one that's actually supposed to, you know, give you the resources so that you can go and do what you need to do. He supplies actually everything, in all honesty. He supplies the opportunities. He supplies the employees that are going to help you. He supplies the necessary funding or resources. He supplies all of that, guys. He supplies all that. And Jesus uses all these different analogies of a stewardship in him leaving and empowering us here to do our assignment, to do what we are called to do. And, you know, from a family perspective, I think this is huge because as a head of the household, as a father, as a husband, as a patriarch of the household, you are called to steward the people that are underneath you, the children, your wife. You are called to do that. And God empowers you to do that. God gives you the resources to do that. And it's not your burden. It's not something that you have to carry, so to speak, all the time, that you don't have to own it. I guess that's where I'm going with all this. You don't have to own this. You can cast that actually onto the Lord and allow him to be the one to sustain you, because he says he's going to sustain you. I mean, that's exactly what it says, you know, that the master actually gave to the servants, gave to the stewards these resources. It wasn't upon them to go and get the resources. It was on them to actually go and multiply the resources that were given to him. Okay? So this is just something that was really kind of resonating inside of me, of ownership and stewardship, and this whole mentality of us shifting to more of a stewardship mindset and taking the burden off of us and allowing us to actually be free of ownership. Okay? Here's my call to action to you, or here's my request. If you'd like to get more information or learn more about how to create a legacy that will last beyond, you know, your children and your grandchildren to 150 years, reach out to me. I've got a contact information right in the bottom of this, YouTube description, or actually in the podcast description below. You can reach out to me, find me, and let's chat. Okay? So, Kingdom Success, know that you're blessed, you're highly favored, you're empowered to prosper, you walk in divine health and spirit of breakthroughs upon you. And gang, we'll catch you on the other side.